First of all, this is a summary of Joshua, Judges, Ruth, all the readings. If you want to see more, just click on the links at the end of this video. Or if you want to listen to this entire thing just straight through, go to Spotify or Apple Music. And it should be under Saint Michael the Frenchman. That's S-A-I-N-T, Saint Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, the Frenchman, F-R-E-N-C-H-M-E-N, M-E-N. Thank you. All right, this concludes Joshua, Judges, Ruth. I just want to thank anybody who listened to this. I want to thank you so much. This has been such a beautiful journey for me. I really think this is making a difference for me personally, to just do something. I feel like God was probably calling me to do something for so long, and I'm sure He's calling me to do lots of other things, but this is a step in the right direction for me because God's just called me to be creative, I think, in ways like this. I think He's called everybody to be creative, but in something like this I've just spent so many days over the past few years just tossing and turning, and I could get really deep into that, but I don't feel like I need to right now. And anyway, who would have thought I'd start some YouTube channel, and I'd start my Spotify back up by reading Joshua, Judges, and Ruth out loud. If you saw this on YouTube, the thumbnail should read Women in Judges, but really, this is more just like a summary. It's like a review of what we just read. And it could have just as much read God loves the underdogs. That would be another thing. But I wanted to make the most attention-getting thumbnail I could, so Women in Judges seemed right. And it really did strike me how much God put the spotlight on women throughout the book of Judges. It's funny to me because Judges is known so much for being this book of blood and gore, and it really is. It's full of all sorts of crazy stories, but also paradoxically there's so much props being given to women, and I think that's especially cool because in ancient times, and we know this is even true in modern times, but in ancient times especially, like, women were regarded as less than, or popularly conceived to be less than, or even men's property or whatever. We know that that's not true, and even in Judges in these ancient times, it's blatantly clear that women are much more than that as we read these stories. And let me just rapid fire a few things right off the bat. So, like, we got Deborah. Deborah is openly called the prophet in the book of Judges. That's chapter 4, verse 4. Then Jael kills Caesarea, and often Deborah is given credit for that, I want to say, by lots of Bible teachers and pastors. But no, Deborah sort of led the charge, and Barak kind of called all of Israel's men together, but only if Deborah went with him, and Deborah's like, fine, I'll go with you, but credit's going to be given to a woman. And you think that the credit is going to be given to Deborah, and maybe in some ways it is, but it's not just Deborah that gets the credit. It's another woman named Jael. Jael gets the credit as well. And Yeah. Jael gets the credit as well. And I'm sorry, I'm just realizing I didn't videotape this, but we'll just make it, we'll make it all audio and just let the thumbnail run through. And then, let's see, so Jael gets the credit. She drives this tent peg barbarically through Caesarea's temple. Caesarea dies there, and there's a whole chapter that Deborah writes a song in honor of Jael. You know, so one of the first psalms or songs in the Bible, you could say, was penned by Deborah, and that's not inaccurate to say. And not just penned by a woman, but also penned by a woman in honor of another woman. All right, so there's two women there. And then later, in chapter 9, Abimelech, he's not a good man. He kills 70 of his brothers in order to grab power. And then he attacks this tower, and this woman, and there's not even, I'm going to call this woman the badass of the month, because Judges, just for this channel, because we're going to be reading lots of Bible, but for this channel, this woman is an anonymous woman, and nonetheless, I'm going to call her the badass of the month. I've never played the video game Assassin's Creed, but there seems to be this sort of persona of like this assassin, this hooded assassin who like does this amazing, brave, and courageous work, and then sort of walks away anonymously. And that's what this woman is. She's not named in the Bible, but she drops this millstone that cracks open Abimelech's head from down below. And then Abimelech is so humiliated. I don't know, he must have gotten a good look at her before. Maybe he saw her, and then all of a sudden the stone was falling, and he just couldn't believe it, and it nailed him before he realized what to do. But he was so humiliated by that. Remember, this dude killed 70 of his brothers. He's not a good guy, and he probably loves the reputation of being a badass himself. But then he gets this millstone dropped on him by this anonymous woman, and then he pleads with one of his soldiers to run him through so that he won't be known for being killed by a woman. But we all know what happened here, right? It wasn't the soldier that killed him. It was the woman that did it. So, nevertheless, that is Abimelech's legacy, whether he likes it or not. And this badass of the month is this anonymous woman, at least in my book. That's in chapter 9, right? So we already got 3 women, and it's not even 10 chapters into Judges. And then we have Samson's mom is barren, and God notices her and gives her a child who's going to be the strongest man ever recorded in the Bible, maybe ever recorded. So God notices Manoah's wife, and once again, she's anonymous too, which is kind of interesting. We're going to read about Hannah soon, and she was barren in 1 Samuel, but of course everybody knows Hannah's name. So God notices this woman and gives her a child, okay? And then at the very end, maybe the hardest story in the Bible, well, let me see, where's Jephthath? Yeah, the fool of the month is what I call Jephthath, and that one's also interesting for other reasons, but Japheth is this mighty warrior, and he leaves his father and mother because they sort of cast him out, he's the son of a prostitute. And we might as well just say also that early in Joshua, God uses a prostitute. He uses Rahab to overthrow Jericho, but that's going to another story. Anyway, Japheth is born from a prostitute, and he's cast away by his parents because he's the son of another woman, quote unquote. And then Japheth becomes this mighty warrior, and he almost sounds like David a little bit, because these scoundrels is what they call him. They sort of rally around Japheth, and he becomes sort of a hero. And then Israel sort of reluctantly rallies around him because they see he has the courage and the knowledge to be a successful warrior and a defender of Israel. But the humiliation of Japheth, and this is why I call him the fool of the month, is even though God makes it clear he's with Japheth in several different ways, Japheth makes this foolish oath and says, Lord, if you give me this victory, when I come back from the victory, the first thing that comes through my front door, I'll sacrifice it. And wouldn't you know it, his firstborn and only child, his firstborn daughter and only daughter, I should say, comes through the front door to congratulate him. And of course, this is hugely distressing to him because he's made this oath to God that if God is on his side and gives him the victory, he'll sacrifice this, and he realizes he has to sacrifice his daughter. And I just think that's a stupid oath for obvious reasons. I don't really care what other pastors and what other people are going to say. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a theologian. I'm not here to get theologians' points and construct some elaborate explanation as to why this is okay, him sacrificing his daughter. But his daughter understands ancient oaths so much that she even encourages his or her father to follow through with his oath. And as the story goes, Japheth actually sacrifices her. It's one of the most disgusting stories in the Bible, in my opinion, and I think it was just a stupid oath. If oaths were taken that seriously, you shouldn't have done it, dummy, first of all. And second of all, even if you did do it, I don't know. I just don't think you should have done it, even if you did give the oath. But I think it sort of runs along the same lines that Jesus says, don't swear by anything on heaven or on earth, but let your yes be yes and your no be no. And I think that's not even quite the same thing, because it wasn't a yes or no situation. It was more Japheth doubting God's blessing in his life. And so he felt compelled, it seems, he felt like he needed God's approval. He needed to make a deal with God in order for God to be with him. And I don't see anywhere in the text where God's like, yeah, you need to make a deal with me, Japheth, here, because I may not be with you. Like, I don't see any evidence of that here in the Bible. And to me, it's clear that God even validates Japheth in that same chapter. So I think Japheth should have just believed God was with him. And it also sort of, I think other passages agree with this. So like if you look in Exodus, where God is talking to Moses in the burning bush, God gets kind of upset with Moses needing so much validation there does come a point, it was okay for Moses to question a little bit, but there does come a point where God's like, you need to just believe I'm with you, Moses. You need to just believe that. And Gideon is also a little bit similar, although neither Moses or Gideon makes such a stupid oath. And once again, that's why I call Jephthath the fool of the month. I mean, ask God for a sign. You know, if you really need it, you might get God a little bit upset, but asking for a sign is better than making a foolish oath, and we'll move on from there. Another thing about women that I think is particularly validating of how the God of the Bible sees women, or even just how God sees, how the Bible sees women, how Israel saw women. There's this whole horrible story at the end of Judges, right, where this Levite has this concubine, and they go to a town that they don't know, and it's a horrible story. She ends up getting raped throughout the night. The guy was far from chivalrous, just basically offering his concubine to these strangers so that they wouldn't harm him and his host, basically. And the woman is basically murdered, or she's, at the very least, she dies from being abused throughout the night. And then, of course, you could say that her life was devalued, and you would be right. She was totally devalued, and she should have never had to go through that. The men should have been courageous, and all that is true. But kind of a peculiar thing happens afterwards, of course, and Israel gets... you can just listen to the video and the reading to go into the rest of the details. It hurts me too much to even mention these details, but there's a whole battle that ensues between the tribe of Benjamin, which were the terrible men who did this act to this woman. Were in the tribe of Benjamin, and the rest of Israel basically taking revenge on the tribe of Benjamin for doing such a terrible thing. And here I did the math. I didn't do the exact math, but from what I can see, somewhere between 80,000 and 100,000 men died to avenge this one woman's life. And whether that's even a healthy relationship with justice or with the relationship between the genders is a totally different question that we don't have time for. But what you can't, at the very least, what we can't argue is whether this woman's life was valued, because that's just crazy. I mean, think about that. Easily over 80,000 men died to avenge this one woman's life. So just to blaze through this really fast, we have Deborah, who's a prophet, who writes one of the first Psalms in the Bible, in the book of Judges. We have Jael, who has the courage, just on her own devices, to drive a tent peg through Caesarea's head. We have this Assassin's Creed woman who drops this millstone. This anonymous woman drops this millstone on Abimelech's head, and Abimelech is humiliated, but it doesn't matter. A woman kills him. And then Samson's mom is remembered and given a child, and then this one woman is avenged by over 80,000 men dying to avenge her life. Not to mention Rahab, a prostitute, being the downfall of Jericho, and Japheth's mom basically being redeemed, at least in part, because Jephthath becomes a mixed character, right? But he does become a successful defender of Israel. And that's just the book of Judges. And I guess Joshua. And then we go into the book of Ruth. And of course, Ruth and Naomi are also redeemed. So it's just pretty striking how much God uses women in all three of these books. And I just think it's worth taking away, and there's lots of things you can take away from these books. These are just a few. Another thing that I noticed that I learned, and it was sort of the brainwave, that's what I'm going to call it, the brainwave of the month, is that Samson actually had 2 Philistine wives. The first wife that he had was actually killed in a vicious fire that was started by Philistines to get revenge on Samson. And so Samson basically had this terrible heartbreak where the Philistines burned his first Philistine wife in a fire, and it's almost like a Mel Gibson movie where, like, the woman dies, you know, or a family member dies. Mel Gibson is so well known for those movies of, like, revenge, you know. And this is like a real life situation where that's just like that, where Samson was furious and, of course, heartbroken, I have to imagine, with his first wife dying, and then he falls in love with Delilah, or into lust, however you want to see it. And Delilah is actually his second Philistine wife. Like, I don't know why. Maybe I'm alone in this, but I just always thought that Delilah was Samson's one and only, and it's not true. She was actually his second wife. So anyway, I think another thing that you could take away from these 3 books, and that you can take this away from lots of books in the Bible, but what we just went over is that God shows up and loves using the underdogs of the world to sort of give himself glory, to show that, like, it doesn't matter how small you are, if your faith is in God, God can use you. God chooses the small things to shame the large. He uses the foolish things, right, to shame the wise. And here God uses a whole list of women for his glory. God also uses Ehud, which is another story at the beginning of Judges. Ehud's a left-handed man, and he plunges this sword into the fat belly of the king. Right? You can also listen to that video. It's just so interesting how God loves using foolish things. Jephthath's another one. The son of a prostitute he uses Manoah and Manoah's wife, you know, who was a barren woman, to be Samson's parents, right? There's another one. Or Naomi and Ruth, you know. They, in ancient culture, those two wouldn't have a chance normally, but God uses them, and not only uses them, but puts them in the line of David, and eventually in the line of Jesus himself. Like, that's amazing. And then another, I think this is the last thing I'll say, to kind of review these three books. I might say a few more things, but like, it's so funny to me that Manoah's wife is the first one to see the angel of God. So God doesn't show up to Manoah, God shows up to Manoah's wife, which sounds a lot like Mary, doesn't it? Or it sounds a lot like Elizabeth in the in the New Testament. God shows up to Manoah's wife, and then this also just shows that the God of the Old Testament's not as cruel and cold as we like to imagine him being. He shows up to Manoah's wife a second time, and Manoah is not there. And you would think that the angel of God would be like, hey, listen, it's Manoah's fault that he's not around. I'm a busy guy. I'm the angel of God and everything. I don't have time to just wait around. But instead, Manoah's wife says, oh, I'm so sorry. My husband isn't here, and he really needs to see you. He needs to know that you're with us. Would you mind just waiting here for a second, and I'll go get Manoah? And the angel says, sure, I'll just wait. Like, talk about messing with our concept of God or the angel of God, right? Like, the angel's like, sure, I'll just chill here in the waiting room. Like, I mean, usually we're thinking that we have to wait on God, and lots of times we probably do, but like, how crazy is it that God's waiting on Manoah in that situation? Yeah, just amazing. And once again, he just works with underdogs. So we have Jericho in Joshua. God basically overthrows Jericho with trumpets. And then again with trumpets and Gideon's battle. God just wants to make it clear throughout these books that he's continuing his legacy with Israel, that Israel will have victory not because of their own strength, but because of their faith in God, just as old as the parting of the Red Sea. God will continue to do things that are unlikely, but are just the ways that will give him most glory, and will give, in lots of ways, will give Israel the most glory, right? Like, how many nations can brag that they won just because they blew some trumpets? Like, might feel more glorious to win them with swords, and in lots of battles they do win with swords, but the most glorious moments are these moments where God uses an unorthodox way of victory and his presence and his blessings. So I think that's about all I have. All right, so it was really fun. You're thrown off that there's video. That's because this section of of this recording is actually being taken, I think, 2 or 3 weeks later. That Jephthath passage was just killing me. Like, even as I posted it, like, I tried my best, but I didn't know how to feel at peace with it. Because honestly, for me, I don't know a story in the Bible that makes me more uneasy than that story. If you can remember, Jephthath was the fool of the month in this section. He was the one who made the foolish oath, and his good and I don't know even how to describe this, because I hate this story so much. But I guess loving daughter said, "Father, follow through with your vow," and her father sacrificed her, and it's just a deplorable story. And I think everything I said was still accurate, but it still just disturbed me, that would even be there. And remember what we talked about in the introduction video. If you haven't seen that video yet, I encourage you to look up Intro to a New Idea, which is my first video that's supposed to be before all the rest of them. But I described what I'm trying to do here as us these aren't sermons, these are actual, it's more like you and I are just walking through this old mansion or this new mansion, and each room is a chapter in the Bible that we're reading through. And I'm trying to mention everything that comes to my mind and that I can recall from previous rooms or from the chapter as a whole that we're reading. And I hope that you're noticing things too as we go along. But this is the advantage of just having other people who love to read the Bible in your life. Because I met up with an old friend of mine who is a pretty amazing student of the Bible himself. And he reminded me that the Torah talks about foolish oaths. And so if this is the horrible part about it, because the story is still there in Judges, but if Jephthath or anybody around him knew the word of God, they would have known that God even gives a gracious way out to somebody who makes a stupid oath. So my buddy, I think he said it was Numbers, but I looked into it, and it's actually Leviticus 5. And it says, Leviticus 5, verse 4, listen to this. It says, or if anyone thoughtlessly takes an oath to do anything, whether good or evil, in any matter, even though they are unaware of it, but then they learn it and realize their guilt, when anyone becomes aware that they are guilty in any of these matters, they must confess in what way they have sinned. Like Jephthath, it's like, that's my daughter. That's obviously not right. I'm not going to sacrifice my daughter. It was a foolish oath. Oh, this is such a relief to me that this is in the scriptures. So, then it says, as a penalty for the sin they have committed, they must bring to the Lord a female lamb or a goat from the flock as a sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement for them for their sin. And listen how gracious this is. Anyone who cannot afford a lamb. So it's not only making provision for somebody who makes a foolish oath, but it's making provision for somebody who makes a foolish oath who can't afford the prescribed sacrifice. So if you can't afford a lamb, then bring 2 doves or 2 pigeons for the Lord for the penalty of their sin. One for the sin offering and one for the burnt offering. And this is partially because now we're going into territory that we haven't read yet. We haven't read the Torah. We've started with Joshua for some silly reason, but I kind of like it. But this is kind of showing untreaded ground for us. And it shows a little bit of the mystery of God. So God has one of these birds for the burnt offering and one for the sin offering. He is to wring its head from its neck and not dividing it completely, and is to splash some of the blood of the sin offering against the side of the altar. The rest of the blood must be drained out of the base. I'm just going to read this whole thing to you. It is a sin offering. The priest shall then offer the other as a burnt offering. And my best idea there is some of it is the sin and we feel it like in the earth, and then the burnt offering goes up to heaven, like on earth as it is in heaven. And I don't claim to understand that. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's what comes to mind as I read this. The prescribed way and make atonement for their sin. Okay, now listen to this. He not only makes provision for somebody who makes a foolish oath, and then also a provision for somebody who makes a foolish oath who can't afford the first prescribed sacrifice, but he even makes provision for somebody who can't even afford the second prescribed sacrifice. So if you can't afford a lamb and you can't afford birds, then you can also bring an offering for the sin, 1/10 of an ephah of the finest flour for a sin offering. They must not put olive oil or incense in it, because it is a sin offering. They are to bring it to the priest, who shall take a handful of it in memorial portion and burn it at the altar on top of the food offerings presented to the Lord. It is a sin offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for them for any of these sins they have committed, and they will be forgiven. The rest of the offering they will bring to the priest as in a case of a grain offering. There we have it, folks. It just shows, like I was talking also in the intro, that in the introduction video, and like I said, look it up. It's Intro to a New Idea. What is this? Is the title of it. Context is so important. So we weren't even, I was saying, if you see in a photo something that's interesting, but you're sort of confused, usually if you zoom out, you might get more of an idea of what's going on around that object in the photo that has drawn your interest. And if it's still confusing, you zoom out more and more and more, right? What just comes to my mind as I bring up that idea of context within a photo. If everybody could have had the biggest zoom out ever of the JFK assassination, right? That would be ideal, because we all understand that we didn't see the full picture, right? We have these close-ups of JFK in that convertible, and we can zoom out a little bit. I'm not a conspiracy theorist on that. I don't know everything about the JFK assassination, but I think everybody agrees that if you could have like 1,000 zoom outs of that day, I think it was in Dallas, Texas, and you could see a 12-block radius of detailed photos of what was going on in that last 10 minutes, before he was shot, we would all understand what happened a lot better. And that's in some ways, this Jephthath story is equally tragic and equally confusing. We just go, what? Sure, you got to be a man of your word and you got to follow what your daughter even wants, but something just doesn't feel right here. Something's not adding up. And I tried my best, because we read Judges, and I couldn't think of anything in Judges that was saying, but of course the Torah would have something, right? And if we would have zoomed out all the way to, we wouldn't have gotten it in Numbers, we wouldn't have gotten it in Joshua, but if we zoomed out all the way to Leviticus, we would have found here in chapter 5, 4 through 14, how God makes provision for somebody who makes a silly, stupid, foolish vow. And nothing that I said was wrong about vows in ancient times. Obviously, people took them very seriously. But God, even back then, understood that people make stupid vows. So that makes me feel so at peace, so much more relieved about that story, and I hope that gives you peace of mind. It's cool for me to be able to walk through some of these mansion rooms, to use the metaphor, with a buddy of mine who knew Scripture better than me, certainly better than me in that particular passage. So, yeah. Anyway, this is Women in Judges, the extended edition. I'll see you guys now. Now we're already through 1 Samuel, and we're starting in 2 Samuel, and I'm enjoying it with you guys. So thanks for watching. See you soon.